To say that God is our refuge and strength is no platitude. Jesus knows the trials we go through. Today on The Perspective with Mike Sherbino and Julie Stautland, we have the privilege to interview God's people, showing us all of the hope and beauty we possess within and without. This week, Mike is one-on-one with Jonathan Evans, a former American football pro who played with the Dallas Cowboys. Jonathan's sermons reach into the power and potential within each of us. Plus, how about a mulligan in your own life? Tanya Christensen is here to talk about her role in the film The Mulligan. Tanya is an actor whose work spans all genres, but in The Mulligan, she plays a woman who overcomes one of life's most difficult and tragic challenges, piecing back together a broken family. And Elvis Yeboah is a Canadian gospel singer-songwriter following in his father, Pastor Maxwell Yeboah's footsteps. Elvis's new organization, Citizens of Love, began in 2021, and he has some very big dreams to tell us about. Plus, Coach Drew is back in the house, a Perspective favorite, who has the score this week on depression, anxiety, and how to cope with its very unpleasant presence. Here's Mike and Julie.
We're glad you're with us today. And one of the things I love about this program, if I can just say so myself, Julie, we have some amazing, amazing guests.
We certainly have.
And
we do.
Today is no exception.
Exactly.
So let me ask you a quick question. Someone in the past, whether, going back 500 years or 5 years, who has impressed you?
Okay.
One person.
One person. Selwyn Hughes from CWR. He is from England, was a Welsh writer, and did the ministry where every day with Jesus, he would write the devotionals. And he lost his wife and his two sons, and right to the bitter end, he was just such a faithful servant of writing such powerful encouragement of God's word for every day.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Amazing statement just about what he believed, what he held on to. Well, in a similar way, we're going to be talking today. I got to interview, when you were away, Jonathan Evans. And in my mind, I kept mixing up his name with Jonathan Edwards. And Jonathan Edwards was a 17th century revivalist. It says that when he preached, people actually held on to the pillars in the church. They were so overwhelmed with the presence and fear of, accounting to God. And the power of God was there, but in the same way, as we listen to Jonathan Evans, there is just a mantle upon him. His father is Tony Evans, but God is speaking through him. Their whole family relation, their amazing, gifted family.
They really are.
We're going to love what he is going to say. And I just want to encourage you today to stay with us. We're going to be right back as I take this special interview with Jonathan Evans.
Well, welcome to The Perspective, everybody. I'm delighted you're with us today. And I'm excited today to have Jonathan Evans with us. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because it is familiar. He's his pastor and friend and father that he works with is Dr. Tony Evans, as they serve both in the local church and national ministry. But I'm excited that Jonathan, he is not only the chaplain of the Dallas Cowboys, but co-chaplain of the Mavericks as well. So we can blame everything that happens to them on Jonathan. Isn't that right, Jonathan?
I guess so.
You take the blame, but hey, I'm really glad you're here. And I remember one day I was speaking to the Toronto Blue Jays, and they were playing the Minnesota Twins, and I was having chapel with the Jays, and then I had to go in and have chapel with the Twins, and I was really caught there, because how do you pray for the team that you don't want to win, right?
Well, yeah, we may not want them to win in a game, but we want them to win in life, and so that puts it in perspective.
Well, that's a good segue. So talk to us about what it means to win in life for you, and especially as you're working with all these professional players, and also as you're anchored to the incredible truth that has shaped your life and your family's life, which is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. I put it in 3 ways to my kids. I tell them, love God, love your family, and take care of your responsibilities. And if you handle those 3 sectors of your life, then number 4, you don't even have to put on the list. And that's the fun. That's the outcomes that you want in your life. And so I try to keep God first in everything that I do. I bring that into my family and how I operate and how I act. And even though not perfectly, you have a trajectory and you have a perspective that you're working from. And then taking care of those responsibilities from his word to your family and executing to make sure your family and yourself is in the best position that you can be. And that all, permeates through the gospel itself. Jesus Christ did that for us. He did the will his father. He took it to the disciples, his family, and then on into the world. And so he took care of those responsibilities, and other people were blessed by it. And so that's what we have to continue to do.
Jonathan, I want you to do something for me, because what you just said, I find that I pray something very similar for my own family. And my prayer is that Jesus would be at the center of their life. And you just talked about putting God first, which in essence is the same thing. How do we do that? And like, how do you tell your kids, like, how do you think that through? Maybe when you're going through a drive-through to get a coffee or something like that. How do you live that out?
Yeah, so the Bible says in Proverbs that wisdom is the beginning of knowledge. That fearing the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Right.
Well, what do you mean fearing the Lord is the beginning of knowledge? Well, you know that He should be the starting point on all of your decision making, and you know that you put God first, not simply by praying when you first wake up, which is good, not simply by reading His Word, but when His Word and His attributes and what He expects governs your decision making. Whatever governs your decision making governs how you live as a husband, governs how you live as a wife, governs how you live as a parent, governs how you live as a single, governs how you go to work and what you do, and your perspective, how you fear, your anger. Whatever governs that is first in your life. And for a lot of people, money is first. You can tell because it governs them. For a lot of people, their history is first, or their pain is first, their trauma is first, because it governs them and tells them what to do. So whatever is the beginning of your knowledge, the starting point is what you actually fear and allow to govern your life.
That's very helpful to hear it and to think it like that. And I'd never actually thought that sometimes people, their pain or their trauma governs their life. That's very insightful. And because it just, seems to overwhelm us at times, and especially as people get wrapped up in their story. So how do you take those principles and teach them to these professional football players or basketball stars? How do you dumb it down for them so that it grabs their heart?
Well, you connect it to what they do. You see, but especially football, but even basketball. I spend more time with the Cowboys, especially through COVID. It's been tough, but you have a playbook, you have a design, you have coaches who teach it to you, have a place to go execute it, and you got a uniform to execute it in. And you're going to do it all against a defense. You're going to do it all against an enemy that is trying to either progress against you or stop you from progressing. And so you have to learn how to execute in the turmoil. You have to learn how to execute when you're facing giants, when you're facing 11 men on the other side of the ball, daring you to go public with that private conversation you just had in the huddle. And a lot of times as Christians, we have a private conversation in church, but we're not our best when it's time to execute against the defense of the culture. And we have to learn how to take the playbook with the uniform of the blood of Jesus Christ that He's given us, learn from the coaches that He's given us, our pastors, our friends, our families, people who can be accountable to us, and then execute it in the hard times, because that's how winning comes and how victory is achieved. Executing the word through the battle.
Very interesting, that phrase, to learn how to execute it in the hard times. I was reading early this morning about the Apostle Paul in the book of 2 Corinthians, and he talked about what he had been through and what he had suffered. And yet he said he counted it nothing for the surpassing joy of knowing Christ, his Lord. But I got thinking, my goodness, the guy went through such hard times, beatings and imprisonments and shipwreck. So what kind of pushback are you getting from players when you share these principles with them? What are they saying in response? Are they just saying, hey, Jonathan, I want to jump on board? Or what typically are they responding with?
Well, they understand that it's true, but they also are fighting another reality, which is their emotions that are connected to the trauma, which is their emotions that are connected to the problem, which is the emotions that are naturally connected to the grief. So I have players that are dealing with loss, people that are dealing with family issues, marital issues, all of these different things that they're dealing with off the field, and your emotions are connected to that. But one of the things that I try to help them understand is that you have to walk by the Spirit so that you don't carry out the desires of the flesh. And so what helps you is to not allow your emotions to determine how you walk. You let the truth to determine how you walk while you still feel emotional. And when you're able to do that, the way that you walk can then change your emotions and give your emotions the opportunity to catch up with how you're walking. Most people let their emotions be the governing authority of their life, and then they end up walking in a way that creates more emotional trauma. If you can walk scripturally, which means walks in the spirit, means walk biblically, then even though you may not be feeling it yet, you'll actually be operating in truth, and truth will have its outcomes.
Wow. You know what? I'm looking forward to hearing more from you, Jonathan, in just a moment. We're going to take a short break and we're going to be right back. I want to hear about your new book, which seems to me is going to tie into what you've just been sharing with us, called Fighting Your Battles. Stay with us. I'll be right back with Jonathan Evans. Well, welcome back to The Perspective, everybody. I'm excited that Jonathan Evans is with us. And in part two of the interview we're going to have today, Jonathan, I'd love for you to unpack the premise of your new book, which is called Fighting Your Battles. Now, I would think that a guy like you wouldn't have to fight anything, but it sounds like maybe you got the odd struggle as well, just like the rest of us peons.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. My dad always told me, you're either in a battle, on your way to a battle, or you just got out of one. Those are the only options that you have in life. He would tell me battles are like the mail you get in your mailbox that just say occupant. They don't even have your name, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who lives there. That you're gonna get that delivered to you. And Jesus didn't lie to us in the Bible. John 16:33, he said, in this world you will have trouble. Will means not might. It means that you will. It's a part of the world. It's a part of what happened after the fall of Adam and Eve. Things were not the same. They were no longer
What is
perfect.
trouble? What is trouble, as you unpack that? What's that mean?
Well, trouble is anything that happens to you or through you that's outside of God's design, that has a negative impact on you and your purpose and design and where God has taken you. And a lot of times that can come in the form of, like me and my wife. We've had 4 miscarriages. Well, that takes you through a whole lot of the trauma, mentally, spiritually, physically, and emotionally, when you're dealing with something like that. I've also had 8 losses, people dealing with grief. I had 8 losses within 2 years of close family members. And I didn't know what was going on. My purpose, trying to define my purpose, trying to define my direction, and feeling totally lost, and feeling totally alone. And so trouble can come in a lot of different ways, when basically it's an attack on your life where you have to fight a battle in order to get to the victory. But understand, victory means that there's a battle somewhere. And so there is no testimony without a test. And I think that we have to learn how to fight our battles and never quit in them. Because my mom told me this, Mike. She always said this, and she said this before she passed in 2019. She said, Jonathan, you can never give up, because your greatest ministry will always come out of your greatest misery. And that's something that I'll never forget, and I want people to know. And so I put that in this book as we flesh it out as an idea, because if people give up in the misery, then they don't get to unpack it in the ministry that God is calling them to.
And it is so easy to quit, but what a great statement from your mom. Like, for her to pass that on to you, like, you probably feel like it's etched in your brain forever, like it's a tattoo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's etched in my brain, and it's really helpful. Yeah, she was saying that she was dying from cancer. And so she was encouraging me through the trouble that we were facing. And she told me a lot of good things. She just said, understand Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purposes. And I said, Mom, how can you be talking about ministry at a time like this? And she said, because son, that's the reason why you exist, that God created you for his purposes, and he will always allow you to go through things that will make you even better for where he's taking you. And so we're using all of the things that we've gone through, me and my wife. As you see in this book, has QR codes. I love that we were able to put those in there. Every 3 chapters, there's QR codes so that you can scan them and watch videos of me telling our story, of me and my wife talking about our miscarriages, of me talking about our losses, because we want to walk with people through the book and also give them perspective of how we were able to define the victory.
And that is so powerful when you hear the 2 people interacting, and it's almost like a kid's storybook that comes alive. You can hear the sound, but you can also see the picture. So tell us a little bit more about the book. And what are the things that people can expect to find in the book? Because you've whetted my appetite. And I'm preaching this Sunday on Moses and the burning bush, but the fact that he was 40 years in the wilderness wandering around. And my goodness, I'd like to play a clip of this interview because it's just going to set it up so well. But what are some of the other things that are coming out of the book as we think about fighting your battle?
Well, you made a case with it. We go through a lot of people in the Bible and understand that Moses was in the wilderness for 40 years, and obviously a part of his purpose would be leading the people in the wilderness for 40 years. And so God makes the connection of your misery to your ministry. David was a shepherd boy, but all God would do is take him from a neglected shepherd boy to a king who's called to lead the sheep, God's sheep. And so all God was doing was upgrading him from his past to his promise. When you look at Joseph was in a pit that had a famine. It was empty without any water in it. When he got to the palace, he was over a famine, people who were empty, and he knew what to do because of his prior experience. So I go through all of that and really show people how God connects the dots from your misery to your ministry so that it opens your eyes up to understanding where you're going, not just where you are. And I think that it's important for us to understand something else, that this is a big thing that I'm going to give you on the interview that I think will even whet your appetite more, but it's good for us to know, is that God has not called us to own our battles. This is a big problem that I had in my life that caused way too much burden, way too much depression and anxiety. Is Second Chronicles 20:15 says, the battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. So God is saying, I'm the owner of the battle. I just need you to steward it. I need you to give it to me and give me the burden, give me the outcome. And I just need you to steward this process in your life that I'm allowing you to go through so that you can learn, grow, and achieve as I take you to what I actually want you to do. And so that is going to be a big thing that we learn, is how to be a steward, not just of our money, not just of our family, not just of our materialism, but also be a steward of our hardships, recognizing we don't own those either. And a lot of people are owning the battle, which means they're carrying all of the burden that they're not meant to carry. And they're trying to manipulate all of the outcomes. And you'll realize real fast that you're not God when you try to get outcomes that only he can get.
You know, I was just about to ask you a question. What would you say to people who are saying, I'm in the middle of it, but I can't figure a way out? And you just answered it. I've never heard it articulated quite that way, that God calls us simply to steward it. And as you think about stewarding, it's a sacred trust. So even the battle that I'm in, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's a sacred trust that God has given to me to push through for his glory and his honor. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely would agree. I think that that's an important statement. And God wants to take responsibility. And he wants to walk with you, and he wants to show you, and like Jesus walking on the water. You know, I'm already on top of your circumstances. If you fix your eyes on me, I can get you to walk on the circumstances that you're afraid of. And he lets us know, come to me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. It's my yoke. He's like, this is mine, unless you want to demand it. Then you can have the yoke, and it's going to be a yoke that's too much for you to carry. So he wants to take responsibility, but only from those who want him to be the God of their life, and they no longer want to be the God of their life.
Powerful words. Jonathan, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here on The Perspective. I hope you come back. I mean, what you have shared today, and I don't say this lightly, it has been a huge encouragement to me. I know it will be to other people. And I want to invite you to get a copy of Jonathan Evans' books called Fighting Your Battles. You can get it at Amazon.com or any of your favorite bookstores. I know that you will be encouraged, and I hope that this interview has whetted your appetite to go out right now and get a copy of that. Jonathan, thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, it's been great to be here, Mike. Thank you for having me.
I'm grateful for your time. Have a great day.
Listen, I can't tell you how important this is, being able to see the purpose in the middle of the pain. I'm not talking about seeing the purpose when the pain is done. I'm talking about seeing the purpose in the middle of the pain. Because let me tell you how important that is. That's the thing that helps you go through the pain. That's the thing that keeps you from quitting. That's the thing that keeps you from throwing up the yellow flag and saying you surrender and that you give up and quit. You see, Joseph would now sympathize with the people because he had experienced it before in his natural state. Joseph could sympathize with the people because he had been that low before.
Well, Julie, I love how Jonathan communicates. There's such passion and intensity.
Totally. I'm just sitting here going, yeah. He just really grabs your heart.
Well, even as we were chatting before we actually taped the interview, I just wanted to write down notes and go from there. So what was one of the big takeaways for you?
Well, for me, I have dealt with physical issues my entire life. And so I was having a conversation with my husband the other day about you get weary, you get exhausted and frustrated. And so what really stood out to me was your greatest ministry comes out of your greatest misery.
That was his mom talking to
I
him.
know, and she was an amazing lady. I got to spend time with her when she was involved with NRB, and just powerful for her to share that with him, because it's true for all of us. If we actually are willing to pause for a moment and go, okay, what we've gone through is something that's usually so personal and so difficult, and when we get over it, that's what God usually uses to the greatest extent to impact other people's lives.
I think the interesting thing, too, about his mom is she was dying at that moment. And it's kind of like she just kept preaching her final messages, thinking, let me write this down.
I'm not done yet.
But then as his son, he's kind of saying, like, hey, Mom, what are you talking about? But she was talking about life, because this is what you do as we live with purpose. I don't know where you're at today in your journey, but living with purpose is so important. And as we listen to Jonathan talk, he's able to articulate it with powerful words. In a couple moments in the Teach, I'm going to be talking about how words matter, how you and I have opportunity to speak life into people's situation. And that is so important. But Julie, before we can speak into other people's lives, you got to receive it for yourself.
You really do.
Yeah. How did that happen for you?
Well, you have to come to the point where you realize you can't do anymore. So you have to allow God to work in your life, and that means surrendering. So if I didn't surrender, I was never going to receive. And it is that daily surrender. Okay, I can't do it on my own. I have to let him. I get my strength from him, and it makes all things possible because I do that. And it sounds cliche to some people, but it's absolutely true when you walk it out.
Okay. Well, stay with us. I'm going to be right back to share God's word. We're going to talk a little bit about the power of our tongue and surrender. As we talk about the power of words, and we were just reflecting on what Jonathan's mother was saying to him, even as she was facing eternity herself, I got thinking about the power of words on an opposite extreme of a very sad story when a lady who committed suicide was actually finally fished out of the water, so to speak. And they combed her to find out who she was, or, was it just another John Doe? And it was. All they found was a piece of paper with 2 words on it. And on that piece of paper, the words were, "They said." I wonder what it was they said. What was it that they said that caused her to give up life, to say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to end it all. One of the things that I want to remind you today is how powerful your tongue is in the way that you speak life into people and the things that you say to encourage them. Because our tongue either cuts people or it caresses people. Solomon said these words, "The tongue that brings healing is a tree of life." And the implication, of course, from that is that we need to speak words which bring life. I know that you found that to be the case, as Jonathan has shared in the interview and in some of the clips that we've shown. He speaks so much life, even about the pain that you and I might be going through at this moment. Have you ever thought about some of the words that we say? I want to just list a few things today to give you some food for thought, but they're found all throughout. They're like pearls just dropped along through the scriptures. And one is words of encouragement. All of us could use a word of encouragement. Mark Twain, the great humorist, said that he could go for a whole month on one word of encouragement. Personally, I'd prefer 5 or 6 a day. And I know some people aren't like that, but you know what? That's my nature. I don't know what your nature is, but I know we need more than just once a month. Jonathan, who was the son of King Saul, knew that David was going to be king. And in a moment when David was so low, he came to David and found him in the wilderness of Ziph. And he said, be encouraged. You're going to be the next king. He didn't say, cheer up, things are going to get better, because right at that moment, David was going through some really hard times. But in the middle of his pain, he spoke a word of encouragement. Do you know someone today who needs a word of encouragement? Maybe it's you, but why not you start by giving that word of encouragement to someone else? Just like Jonathan Evans, just like his mom spoke that word into his heart. You know, there are other words that are so appropriate as well, words of comfort. And I love how Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. In yesterday's broadcast, I was referencing Mary and Martha. They were the same two sisters whose brother died. And Jesus spoke those words when he said to Martha, I am the unchanging one, but I am the resurrection and the life. Death is not the end. There is hope. And we can speak that with great confidence and assurance. And then there's words of perspective. You have a son or daughter who just feels like they've blown it or life is over, or maybe it's a friend that's even older and they're saying, can I ever recover? You know, there's a beautiful story of a young man named John Mark. He deserted the Apostle Paul on his first missionary journey. Paul said, you know what, he can't come with me on the next trip. But later on in life, Paul wrote, and he said these words. He said, bring Mark, the one who had deserted them, because he saw that he had changed, that he had matured, that he had grown. It was words that gave perspective, because he said, he is now useful in the ministry. I want you to know that regardless of how you've blown it, God has this beautiful way in my life and in yours of making trophies out of trash cans. And he is inviting you to gain his perspective, that no matter how much you blow it, no matter how much you think I have messed up, he still has a place for you. But it's really easy to tear people down, isn't it? And you and I know the power of the word of gossip, because gossip betrays the confidence we read in Proverbs 11:13. A gossip separates close friends. It's almost like a little pry bar that creates a wedge that causes so much distrust and so much pain. But what about how you're going to speak today? You know, there are many negative words we can say, but on the other side, so many positive words. I'm thinking about a conversation, a crucial conversation that I have to have with someone very soon. And there were times I was rehearsing it, and the words in my mind weren't that positive. God was saying, you need to speak words that give hope, words that give life. And you have that opportunity today as we realize that in the midst of our pain, God is there with his presence, and he wants to give you this opportunity to minister hope and healing with the words that you say.